The hallway camera flickered to life at exactly 2:43 a.m. I saw it on my monitor in the security office, a small movement in the corner of the frame, like someone ducking behind a pillar. The old textile mill had been shut down for years, but the owners kept a skeleton crew of guards like me to watch over the property until the demolition crews arrived. It was just me tonight, the only one on duty in this sprawling complex of brick buildings and empty lots. The air in the control room felt thick, heavy with the smell of stale coffee and dust from the vents. I leaned forward, adjusting the screen. Nothing. The hallway was empty again. I told myself it was a rat or the wind rattling a loose window. But then the motion light in that same corridor clicked on. I froze. I had been doing this job for 8 months. Long enough to know every creak in the floorboards and every shadow cast by the overhead pipes. My shifts were mostly quiet, just me and the monitors, the faint buzz of the fluorescent tubes above my head. I would walk the perimeter once an hour, boots echoing in the vast loading bays, flashlight cutting through the dark like a knife. Tonight the rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the grounds slick and shining under the security floods. I checked the logbook. No one had signed in since my relief left at 11. The system showed all doors secure still. That light had come on for a reason. I keyed the radio. More out of habit than anything static answered back. I decided to check it myself. The walk to Sector 4 took longer than usual, my footsteps sounding too loud in the silence. The corridor smelled of damp concrete and old machine oil. I swept my light along the walls, empty, no footprints. In the thin layer of dust on the floor, I stood there for a full minute, listening, nothing but my own breathing. When I got back to the office, the monitor showed the light off again. I sat down, heart slowing. Maybe I was just tired. The coffee had gone cold in my mug. I took a sip anyway. It tasted like metal. The next trigger came 20 minutes later. This time, it was the service elevator in Building C. The camera showed the doors sliding open on their own, the car empty, then closing. Again, I rewound the footage. Nothing visible, just the doors moving. I rubbed my eyes and kept watching the live feed. The mill had been empty so long that small glitches felt normal. Pipes settling, electrical surges from the old grid. I told myself that, but then the intercom in the control room crackled a soft exhale, like someone standing right beside the microphone on the far end. I stared at the speaker. No one used those units anymore. I pressed the talk button. Hello. My voice sounded small in the room. No answer, just that same faint breathing, in and out, steady. I switched the feed to the camera nearest the intercom panel in Building B. The hallway was still. I sat back, the chair creaking under me. The clock on the wall read 3:12 outside. The wind picked up again, rattling a loose sheet of corrugated metal. Somewhere far off, I focused on the monitors, forcing my breathing to match the rhythm of the static. It was the third hour when the pattern changed. On camera 7, the one overlooking the old break room, a figure appeared, tall, thin, standing with its back to the lens, head slightly tilted, as if listening. I zoomed in. The image was grainy, but I could make out the shape of a coat, the way the sleeves hung empty. I blinked hard. It had not been there a second ago. I grabbed the radio again, called out into the empty complex. The figure did not move. I stood up, legs unsteady, and headed for the door. The walk across the yard felt endless, gravel crunching under my boots, the night air cold enough to sting my face. I reached the break room door. It was ajar inside. The tables were covered in dust, chairs pushed neatly against the walls. No one. I swept the beam of my flashlight into every corner. Nothing but cobwebs and the faint outline of where machines once stood when I returned. To the office, the figure was gone from the screen, but now it was on camera 3. Closer. Standing at the end of the access tunnel that led straight to the control room I locked. The door, my hands shook as I did it. The night stretched on. I kept the monitors running, eyes burning from staring. Every few minutes I would glance at the tunnel camera. The figure stayed put, motionless, face still. Hidden, I tried the radio one last time. The breathing came back, louder now. Closer then, it spoke a single word. My name. Whispered so softly I almost missed it. I had never told anyone here my full name. The sound of it in that empty building made the hair on my arms rise. I did not answer. Instead, I pulled up the archived footage from earlier in the shift. There, on the break room camera from 2 hours ago, the figure stood in the same spot. But this time, the timestamp showed it watching me walk past on my patrol. I had not seen it. Then it had been waiting. I kept scrolling back further. The figure appeared in every hallway I had walked that night. Always just behind me. Always out of sight until I left the frame. My mouth went dry. The clock ticked past 4. I decided to leave early, gather my things, sign out. As I stood up, the tunnel camera showed the figure moving. It was walking toward the control room now, slow and deliberate. I did not wait to see it reach the door. I ran. The man finally spoke again. When we were halfway there, he asked if I had kids. The question came out of nowhere. Soft but direct, I told him I had a daughter, 12 years old. He nodded once, as if that meant something. Then he said her name, not the nickname I used, her full given name that hardly anyone outside family ever heard. My hands tightened on the wheel. I had not mentioned her. I asked how he knew. He only smiled faintly and looked out the window. The streetlights flickered across his face in a way that made his reflection look almost transparent. I focused on driving. The address he had given was coming up. A row of older homes with porches and dim porch lights. When I pulled over, he leaned forward and placed something on the front seat, a small silver key. He said, "Keep it safe." Then he stepped out and walked toward the house. Without looking back, I watched him until he disappeared between the hedges. The meter read $23. I marked it paid in the app and pulled away. 2 nights later, the same address came through dispatch. Same time. Same quiet street. I took the call without thinking. When I arrived, the man was waiting again. Same coat. Same slow walk to the car he climbed in and gave the exact same destination. I felt a chill run down my back. I asked if he remembered me. He looked up into the mirror and said, "Yes. You drove me home the other night." His voice was the same, tired and flat. I drove in silence this time. Radio off. The cab smelled the same, wet wool and pennies. When we reached the house, he placed another key on the seat, identical to the first. He said, "Thank you for bringing me back." Then he was gone again, vanishing between the same hedges. I sat there for a long minute, engine idling. The house looked dark. No lights on any windows. I checked the app history. The previous trip had been logged, but the passenger name field was blank. I drove home uneasy, the 2 keys heavy in my pocket. The 3rd time it happened, I almost refused the call, but work was slow, and the address paid well. I arrived, and there he was, waiting in the same spot. This time he looked different. Shoulders more stooped, face even paler. He got in and gave the address again. I drove without asking questions. Halfway there, he spoke once more. He said, "The accident was quick, you." No, I did not understand. He continued. The car came out of nowhere. The driver never stopped. My hand started to shake. I pulled over a block from the house and turned around in. My seat, the back seat, was empty. The door had not opened. The keys were still on the front seat. 3 of them now, lined up neatly. I drove straight to the address anyway. The house was dark, but a small plaque by the gate caught my headlights. It was a memorial for a man killed by a hit and run taxi 2 years earlier on this exact street. The photo on the plaque was him. I never picked up another fare from that neighborhood again. Sometimes I still find small silver keys on the floor of my cab, even after I vacuum it clean after a long night behind the wheel. Some people seek shelter in places that are supposed to be safe, but a night auditor at a quiet hotel learned that safety is an illusion I was working. The front desk alone that evening, the lobby lights were low, casting soft shadows on the polished floors. The hotel was one of those old places with only 30 rooms, mostly booked by travelers passing through around 2 a.m. A woman came in without a reservation. She looked exhausted, her clothes damp, though it had not rained in hours. She asked for room 217. Specifically, I checked the system. It was available. I handed her the key card and watched her head to the elevator. The doors closed behind her with a soft ding that echoed in the empty lobby. I went back to my paperwork. The only sound, the hum of the vending machine in the corner of the night, felt ordinary enough. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. It was room 217. The woman's voice was quiet, almost whispering. She said there was someone else in the room with her, standing by the window. I asked if she wanted me to send security. She said no, just come up and check. I took the master key and rode the elevator up the hallway. On the second floor, smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I knocked once, announced myself, then opened the door. The room was empty. The bed had not been touched. The curtains hung still. I called out. No answer. I checked the bathroom, the closet, nothing. I went back down and called the room. No one picked up. I assumed she had stepped out. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same room this time. She sounded frightened. She said the person was still there, watching her from the corner. I told her I had just checked and the room was vacant. She insisted I come back up. I went. The elevator ride felt longer this time. When I opened the door, the room was still empty, but the curtains were now drawn shut, and the bedside lamp was on. I had not turned it on. I stood there, the key card heavy in my hand. The air felt colder than it should have. The calls kept coming every 20 minutes. Each time her voice was a little more strained, describing the figure moving closer, describing its face in small, careful details. She said it looked like someone she used to know. I checked the security feed for the hallway. Outside room 217, the camera showed the door remaining closed the entire time. No one entered or left after she went in at 4, and the phone rang one last time. She did not speak. Right away, I could hear breathing on the line, slow and steady. Then she said the name of the hotel's original owner, a man who had died in that very room 30 years earlier. She said he was sorry for what happened. The line went dead. I sat at the desk, staring at the silent phone. When the morning shift arrived, I checked the guest log. Room 217 had never been rented that night. The system showed it vacant since the previous afternoon, but the key card I had given her was missing from the drawer. I never saw the woman again. Sometimes late at night, the phone at the front desk rings with no caller ID, and I let it go to voicemail just to hear the quiet breathing on the message. After nights like that, Some people still find themselves in places where the line between the living and everything else grows thin. A hospital worker on the overnight shift in the quiet ward discovered how easily that line can blur. I had been a night nurse for 9 years on the 6th floor, the long-term care unit where patients slept or waited or sometimes simply faded. The ward was never loud, just the steady beep of monitors, the soft shuffle of rubber soles on linoleum, the occasional call bell. That night the floor was nearly empty, only 7 patients total. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow. I made my rounds at 2:30, checking IV lines and charting vitals. Everything was normal. Mrs. Alvarez in 612 was resting peacefully, her breathing even. Mr. Patel in 618 had his eyes closed, the television murmuring low. I refilled a water pitcher and moved on. The hallway felt longer than usual, the way it sometimes does when the rest of the building is asleep. Around 3:15, the call bell from room 604 rang. That room had been vacant for 2 days, the bed stripped, and the chart cleared. I walked down anyway, thinking it might be a faulty switch. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was dark except for the small night light above the sink. The bed was made, sheets tight and white, no one there. I turned to leave when the call bell rang again. 3 short bursts from the panel by the empty bed. I stood still, listening. The monitor above the bed clicked on by itself, the screen glowing green with a flat line and a single set of vitals that matched no patient on the floor. I switched it off at the wall. The room went quiet again. I closed the door firmly behind me and walked back to the nurse's station. The log showed no one assigned to 604. I noted the incident anyway, the way we always did with glitches. 15 minutes later, the call bell rang from 604. Again, this time I took another nurse with me, though she had been on break and looked as tired as I felt. We opened the door together. The bed was still made, but now the pillow had a faint indentation, as if someone had just lain down. The air smelled faintly of the aftershave one of our long-term patients used to wear, the one who had passed in that room last month. We checked under the bed. In the bathroom, nothing. My colleague shrugged and went back to her break. I stayed a moment longer. The call bell panel was dark and silent. When I returned to the station, the monitor for room 604 showed a heartbeat again, steady and slow. I stared at it until the line flattened once more. I did not call maintenance. I simply sat there charting, the pen moving across the page while my mind turned over the same small details: the smell, the indentation, the way the bell had rung 3 times exactly like the patient used to signal when he needed help. Turning the last call came just before dawn. Room 604 again. This time when I reached the door, it was already open inside. The bed was turned down, the sheets folded back neatly. A single set of fresh footprints crossed the linoleum from the door to the bed and stopped. They were barefoot, small, the same size as the patient who had died there. I stood in the doorway and did not step inside. The call bell rang once more, soft and final. Then the monitor clicked off by itself. I closed the door and walked away without looking back. The morning crew found the room exactly as it should be, vacant and clean. No footprints, no turned down sheets. I finished my shift and went home, but every night since then, when the ward is quiet and the lights are low, I still hear that call bell ringing from an empty room. 3 short bursts, Patient and waiting, those nights stay with you. They follow you home and wait in the quiet hours before sleep. If you have ever worked alone after dark, you already know what I mean. The dark remembers. It always remembers. And sometimes it decides to remind you sleep well or don't.